If you're a musician like me, then you probably find it boring playing along to a metronome. I want to be playing this, when I should at least spend some time playing this first. As you probably know if you've seen any of my other videos, I like to put a huge amount of effort into solving relatively insignificant problems, like this one. So in this case I set about making something to help motivate me to practice along with a metronome more, and make me stay in time while I do it. Starting a metronome is easy, stopping when you're bored is even easier, so my project is going to make it harder to stop. Let's say by adding some gentle fear of being shot by a foam dart. Yes, it's only a foam dart, but if you've ever been shot by one, it's enough to give you the incentive to keep playing, especially when there's 6 of them loaded and ready. So here's the premise. If I miss a beat, stop playing, or play out of time, then I get shot by a foam dart. Not only that, but I'll get shot once for every beat that's missed. Obviously I can't play forever, so when starting the metronome I'll set the duration of time I want to play. So let's get started. First thing I need to build is something to automatically shoot, so let's start with a frame to hold this foam dart gun. I figured a simple piece of wood could be used to fit around the gun and act as a plate to mount the mechanics for automating the trigger pull. Or in simpler terms, wood holds gun, motors make ouch. I made a mistake with my wood choice though. It split as soon as I cut it. So with some spare wood, I patched it back together and voila, it fits nicely around the handle. My plan to activate the trigger was to use 2 simple servos. I'm using 2 because this trigger in particular requires more force to pull than a single servo can handle. They'll be placed behind the gun and pull a string that wraps around the trigger. I also need to make sure that the gun is stable so it doesn't wiggle on top of the mount. This particular foam dart gun actually has 2 triggers, one to spin up the motors and one to push the darts into the motorized wheels. My initial plan was to just leave the motors running, but they're loud and they frighten my dog. So naturally I could add another servo just to control that trigger, but it's awkward to fit underneath the wood around where the tripod would be mounted. So I found a hack. This gun features a hatch to access the internals so you can unclog any jams. When the hatch is opened, it releases a switch that enables the motors, so the motors aren't ever on when the hatch is open. I simply added a 3rd servo which would open and close the hatch to enable the motors, assuming the smaller trigger was constantly pulled. Finally, to finish things off, I drilled a hole in the bottom of the wood, and with some threading, it fits nicely on any standard tripod. If it's not clear already, visual aesthetic was not one of my priorities during this build, like most of my builds. Except for my LED drum kit, which if you haven't checked it out, you should check it out up here. Now, how to control the motors. Well, a Raspberry Pi suits best in my opinion. It'll be easier to link with the drum kit than something like an Arduino, but I'll explain more about that later. For now, I'll connect the servo wires to the GPIO pins on the Raspberry Pi. GPIO, by the way, stands for General Purpose Input and Output. If you haven't used a Raspberry Pi before, the voltage on these pins can be easily controlled by code. A simple script to activate all the servos, and now we can test how it shoots. Here we go. If you think that didn't sound right, then you're correct. That was the sound of the wire breaking. Turns out the servos were more powerful than I thought, and they were pulling the trigger too far back and the force was breaking the wire. So after replacing the wire and reducing the movement length of the servos, it works. So now onto the code design. Basically here we have the Raspberry Pi, a drum, and my fantastic drawing of a foam dart gun. When starting the metronome, my code will take into account the speed, then it will automatically generate all the times a click should play after the start point. Then as time goes by, when each of those points are reached, it will play a click. If a hit is detected, it will compare the hit time with all of those calculated acceptable times, and it should be in range with at least 1 to be accepted. Say for example we get hits in like this. This is a rough drawing, but as you can see, the purple represents the clicks, the blue represents a drum hit. As time goes by, you can see these parallel lines are the accepted margin of error for any hits. If we look at this one, we can see that this hit is slightly ahead of the click, but it's within the accepted range. This one is bang on time, so that's accepted. This one is out of time, it's too delayed, and it's outside the margin of error, so this one is getting shot. And then this one is back in time, slightly beforehand, but it's accepted. So in this case, someone's getting shot. The accepted time range between the clicks and the hits will be the difficulty level. A short time will mean you'll have to be very accurate with the metronome, and obviously a long time will mean that you can be looser with your hits. By the way, I've linked all my code below, including a diagram of the wire setup. Feel free to check it out and you can see how everything works together, or even try and build your own. I'll be using my electric drum kit to capture the MIDI notes. Earlier on I mentioned that I chose a Raspberry Pi over an Arduino. That's because it's easier to capture the MIDI notes on the Raspberry Pi. Now for the proper testing. I started by setting the threshold pretty high for how accurate the notes should be. I also only set it to check quarter notes for now to make things simpler. It didn't matter at first anyway because of how many times I needed to stop and fix the code again and again. Eventually I got the motors to trigger, but no shots. And then finally. One more time to be sure it's not a fluke. And you guessed it. That was the sound of the wire breaking once again.
You did not just break again.
So while I go off and fix that, let's see why metronome practice is so important. Do you get it? So it's a play on how drummers count their time. We count beats like 1E and a 2E and a my 2 cents, as in my opinion. I think every musician should delegate some time in their practice routine to play along with a metronome. I think it's absolutely essential to get that internal rhythm locked in, even if it's fast or slow. You know, playing fast is great, fantastic, sounds good, but the absolute best musicians can hit the beat on the nose at slower tempos also. Get it? Because 1E and a 2 is how I would count my 16th notes. Is it coming across at all? If you want to hit the big time, you're probably going to have to get used to playing along to a click anyway. Say for example, light shows, video cues, or even a backing track. You want to have that consistency in your rhythm while you're playing. Otherwise the listener doesn't have anything to cling to and it's very hard to listen to. See, I have here quarter notes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 16th notes here we got 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... It's even good just to know kind of speeds off the top of your head, like play me a beat at 120, you know roughly what speed you're aiming for. The end goal is to be able to have that click in your head, so as you're playing you can stay in time with minimal effort. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... And that's why I think every musician should have a metronome playing throughout their practice routine, whatever they're playing. 1E and a 2 cents. My opinion. To prevent things from breaking again, I replaced the wire with fishing line so it could stretch a bit if needed. So let's get back to testing. Alright, I have everything set back up with the fishing line and I have the threshold pretty high, so brought the threshold down a bit more. Okay, the threshold's down about where I had started having issues the last time. Oh god, that sneaks right up on you. Ah! Ow! Ah, you're empty. I've bumped it up to double time, so this has the potential to shoot me a lot. Very quickly. Clearly the shooting function definitely works. I need to work more on the threshold times though, so I can actually play without getting shot non-stop. This was a fun project. I had a lot more problems than I'd foreseen, but I got there eventually, and it works and it's useful. I've used it a couple of times since recording the video, and I think I've dialed in the proper threshold time, which balances between getting all 6 shots and triggering no shots at all. So it helps to keep my playing tight and clear. One other cool thing too is that because I linked it in with MIDI notes, means I can actually use it with keyboards and synths and any other MIDI instrument as well. Although my shoulder hurts too much and I'm not as good a piano player as I am a drummer, so I think I'll save that for another video. Hopefully you found this video interesting or funny. If not, I just look like a knob. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking down below and or subscribing. I have so many more musical projects like this I want to do, and liking and subscribing really helps. It also helps to check out any of my other videos that I've already done. All the cool kids are doing it.